The Silk Roads, A New History of the World is the book we are starting today, and this book is authored by Peter Frankopan. This book tells us history of the world through Silk Roads, and this book also kind of debunks the Eurocentric view of history and challenges the historical narratives we are taught. So, author in the preface of the book says that he had become uneasy about his classes at school, which taught mainly about Europe and United States and left other parts of the world untouched. So, the author was inspired by Eric Wolf's critique of the traditional Western historical narrative. Now, he says that the region connecting the Mediterranean to the Himalayas, often seen today as unstable or peripheral, was historically the true center of the world, where major religions, empires, and innovations arose. Its erasure from mainstream history is due to Orientalism and the dominance of Western historical narratives. This shift of mantle of progress happened due to the voyages of Columbus and also Vasco da Gama. The author says about the Silk Roads that these pathways serve as the world's central nervous system, connecting peoples and places together, but lying beneath the skin, invisible to the naked eye. So let's start the chapters. The book has 25 chapters and one conclusion chapter, and I'm going to be covering one chapter per video. So let's start with chapter 1, the creation of the Silk Road. So the author says that from the beginning of time, the center of Asia was where empires were made. From the earliest times, Central Asia, particularly Mesopotamia, was the birthplace of civilization, where fertile lands that enabled agriculture, urbanization, and early law codes were developed here. Among the empires that rose from this region, Persia became the most significant. By the 6th century BC, the Persian Empire expanded rapidly, reaching from Egypt to the Himalayas. Now, according to author, the Persians thrived due to their openness to foreign customs, their efficient administration, their innovative infrastructure, including a vast road network that facilitated communication across the empire, which is an achievement viewed by Greek historian Herodotus with wonder. And another factor was agricultural investment, which included advanced irrigation and it supported population growth and urbanization, not only in Mesopotamia, but also in regions like the Oxus Valley and Nile Delta. Persia presented itself as a beacon of stability and fairness. Tolerance of minorities was legendary, as was seen in their policies that included the release of Jews from their Babylonian exile. Trade flourished in ancient Persia, which provided revenue that allowed rulers to fund military expeditions, and that brought yet more resources into the empire. But Persia faced persistent problems from the north, which was a world dominated by nomads known as steppes, stretching from the Black Sea across Central Asia as far as Mongolia. Scythians killed Cyrus the Great. Now, these nomads were feared, but also valued, especially for their fine horses. And at that time, Greeks resisted Persian invasions, but they also admired and sought to learn from Persian innovations, incorporating aspects of their warfare and culture. Now we move on to Alexander the Great. Upon becoming king in 336 BC, Alexander of Macedon turned his ambitions eastward toward the Persian Empire. Now, the author says here that not for a moment did he look to Europe, which offered nothing at all: no cities, no culture, no prestige, no reward. Now, Alexander the Great defeated Darius III at Gaugamela in 331 BC, opening the gates to Persia's heartlands. Cities like Babylon surrendered. Alexander was not only a brilliant military strategist, but also showed respect for local customs and religions. He preserved local elites, adopted Persian dress and titles, and presented himself as a legitimate heir to the Persian throne rather than a mere conqueror. His inclusive approach helped stabilize his expanding empire. Within a few years of Alexander's death, Seleucus, who had taken part in all the king's major expeditions, found himself governor of land that stretched from the Tigris to the Indus River, and this dynasty, known as Seleucids, was to rule for nearly 3 centuries. So, different cities were named after Alexander's name. Due to these conquests, Greek language, philosophy, art, and governance spread across Asia, influencing regions as far as India and Central Asia. Now, the author also says that hitherto Buddhists had actively refrained from visual representations, but they felt threatened by the success of these new religious practices which came from Greek and began to create their own visual images. He says that there is a correlation not only in the date of earliest statues of Buddha, but also in their appearance and design. Alexander's conquests created vibrant cultural exchange networks, influencing literature, science, and religion on a vast scale. Now, let's talk about China and nomadic tribes. So, the relations between ancient China and the nomadic Xiongnu tribes of the Mongolian steppes were tense and complex. Though the Xiongnu were seen as barbaric, the Chinese often opted for diplomacy over conflict, and they offered tributes such as silk, wine, and rice so that the peace could be maintained. The Han dynasty eventually eventually launched successful campaigns that pushed the Xiongnu back and allowed China to take control of the Gansu corridor by 119 BC. This marked the beginning of the Silk Roads and opened China to transcontinental trade. Silk became the primary commodity exchanged across this vast network. Silk was not just a luxury item, it also functioned as currency in the Han Empire and was used to pay troops, settle fines, and trade where coins or grain could not be used like in far-off regions. China also developed a sophisticated trade regulation system. Foreign merchants had to follow strict protocols, obtain passes, follow set routes, and were closely monitored, and it was merely for customs and taxation purposes rather than surveillance. The author says that these activities show us an early form of globalization, where there are extensive cultural and commercial exchanges. And the author says, we think of globalization as a uniquely modern phenomenon. Yet 2000 years ago too, it was a fact of life, one that presented opportunities, created problems, and prompted technological advance. Now, around 247 BC, the Seleucid Empire in Persia collapsed and was replaced by the Arsacid or Parthian dynasty founded by Arsacus. The Arsacids blended Greek and Persian traditions, and they brought stability and prosperity to the region. Meanwhile, in the Mediterranean, Rome was rising from a provincial backwater into a powerful empire. As it expanded, Rome's ambitions also shifted eastwards and not towards Europe. Rome developed into a highly militarized and competitive society where conquest and displays of power were glorified. Its disciplined army was central to Rome's expansion. It conquered Gaul in 52 BC and then turned its attention to the east. Egypt, long admired for its wealth generated by the fertile Nile Valley, became a prime target. Now, the adopted son of Caesar, Octavian, defeated Queen Cleopatra and her ally Mark Antony in 30 BC. This marked the transformation of Rome from a republic into an empire, with Octavian emerging as Augustus, and this was due to the conquest of Egypt. The acquisition of Egypt had a profound economic impact on Rome. Grain prices fell, interest rates dropped significantly, and property values surged. Rome's economic success was built on harsh taxation and resource extraction from its new provinces. Censuses were conducted in conquered territories like Egypt and Judea to ensure accurate taxation and labor control. Asia, which was already renowned for its luxury and wealth, became a magnet for Roman attention. Roman elites were fascinated by its exotic goods, arts, and pleasures, though writers often portrayed Asian influence as corrupting. Little wonder that it was in the East that Roman soldiers came of age, wrote Sallust. This was where Roman soldiers learned how to make love, to be drunk, to enjoy statues, pictures, and art. Nonetheless, Augustus initiated expeditions and surveys to map trade routes through Arabia, Persia, and Central Asia. Rome's trade with India intensified rapidly after Egypt's annexation. Roman ships sailed from Red Sea ports to India carrying wine and gold and returning with pepper, ivory, gems, and spices. Tamil poetry described Roman merchants and their opulent goods with awe and admiration. Indian ports served as emporia for products from even farthest east, such as Vietnam and Java, creating a vast intercontinental trade network. This surge in commerce transformed Roman lifestyles. Wealthy Romans developed a taste for rare and luxurious items, which became symbol of status. Writers of that era criticized this decadence. Some conservative Roman observers were appalled by the growing presence of Chinese silk in the Mediterranean region. Some, like Seneca, criticized it morally, and some others criticized it on economic basis. Now, in the east, the Kushan Empire, which was established by the USA after being displaced from the Tarim Basin by the Chinese, thrived in part due to this commerce. They minted coins modeled after Roman currency and operated out of Indian ports like Barigaza, where traders exchanged Roman gold for spices, silks, ivory, and more. Although goods were imported and exported from the Mediterranean into China in growing quantities, the Chinese themselves played little role in trade with Rome via the Indian Ocean. More frequently, China interacted with Persia, sending multiple embassies annually to exchange luxury goods and exotic produce. Roman knowledge of China was minimal, with only one embassy recorded reaching China in 160 AD. Rome's primary eastern concern remained Persia, which was a rival empire, a competitor, and frequent military target. This focus on Persia culminated with Emperor Trajan's eastern campaigns in 113 AD. He captured key cities like Babylon and Ctesiphon and issued coins declaring Persia capta, means Persia has been conquered. Trajan dreamed of reaching India but died before he could realize this ambition. However, Persia remained a central focus, especially under successive emperors. Some campaigns ended in disaster, such as when Emperor Valerian was captured, humiliated, and killed by the Persians in 260 AD. Around 220 AD, the Sasanian dynasty emerged and it centralized the power and also reformed administrative structures. Officials were held accountable through extensive use of seals, marketplaces were strictly regulated, and new cities and infrastructure projects were built to stimulate economic and urban growth. These reforms allowed Persia to extend its influence eastward, reclaiming territory from the Kushan and intensifying trade with Central Asia and beyond. By 300 AD, Roman Empire's vast eastern frontier was under stress. Rome's expansion had reached its natural limits, and now it was the one being threatened. Facing financial pressure, Roman Diocletian attempted to overhaul the tax system, even sending the inspectors across the empire to count every vine and tree. Eventually, Diocletian retired to Croatia to grow cabbages, trading the burdens of empire for personal peace. His successor, Constantine, decided to build a new imperial city at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, choosing Byzantium on the Bosphorus as its site. The result was Constantinople, a grand city with palaces, forums, and institutions that rivaled and even surpassed Rome. Now, the author said that the ancient world was much more sophisticated and interlinked than we sometimes like to think. In antiquity, cities were deeply interconnected through trade and cultural exchange. Chinese silk, Indian spices, and Roman gold all moved along the Silk Roads, linking diverse civilizations. This was a world that was connected, complex, and hungry for exchange. Now, Rome's eyes had been fixed on Asia from the moment it transformed itself from a republic into an empire. And so too, it turned out, had its soul, because Constantine and the Roman Empire had found God. And this new faith, Christianity, was also from the East. Now, Christianity was about to pan out in all directions. And that is what we are going to be talking about in the next chapter.